Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carrie Simpson, and I'm the CEO of Managed Sales Pros. Today, we're talking about creating and repurposing marketing content, and we're being joined by Barb, whose last name I can never pronounce and should have asked beforehand. And I realized that right when we were like deer in the headlights, I didn't ask. So Barb is going to introduce herself. Barb, take it away.
Okay, so for everyone who's taking notes, my name is Barb Paluszkiewicz, and it's spelt the exact way it sounds, as Paluszkiewicz. You can trust and verify at our website, cdntechnologies.com. And what we do at CDN Technologies is we provide technology services that protect and improve organizations. And we do it from our worldwide headquarters based out of Oakville, Ontario, Canada. And you could reach us at cdntechnologies.com. We've been providing technology services since 1989. We were formerly known as JP Consulting. And in 2002, we changed the name to cdntechnologies.com. And we've been going strong ever since. It's been a wild ride with the pandemic, but it was also one that we were prepared for, as this wasn't our first rodeo, so to say. There was the .com bust. There was everything that happened in the 90s. I guess that was the .com, and then now the pandemic. So even though that COVID feels a little bit different, I'm still in lockdown here in Canada. So that's why I keep bringing it up. So for everyone else who's still in lockdown, you know what, I feel for you, and I see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, here in Michigan, we are allowed to go to dinner, but that's about it. And it's too cold to go anywhere anyway, so it still feels like lockdown.
Oh, I think my most elaborate dinner that I've had is Wendy's and Popeye's chicken. That's about it. It has a drive-through, so.
Ooh, fancy. Have you seen the lineups for the Chick-fil-A's? Do they have Chick-fil-A there?
We do not have Chick-fil-A here. There are so many restaurants that are very familiar in the US that we do not have here. So I'll just stick to the basics, like, Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, Starbucks.
Like the fact that people order McDonald's blows my mind. Like, I still haven't gotten used to the fact that people will like go onto an app and have McDonald's delivered to their home. McDonald's to me is like the place I go when my kids have made me so absolutely batshit that I need to throw them in a bacteria-laden pit of balls while I drink a bad cup of coffee for an hour.
Oh, I think my kids are going to reminisce about Starbucks as they grow older and like, oh, this tastes like mom's cooking.
Well, we're going to get started today. So thanks everyone that joined us today. We're talking about content creation, content adjustment, and repurposing. And as we were chatting before the webinar began, Barb and I realized that we both have very different approaches to how we create and repurpose content. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting discussions today. We have a chat panel on the right-hand side of the platform. So if you've got a question for Barb or for myself, go ahead and type it in there, or you can wait until the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Either way, we'll try to get to all of them. So the things that I wanted to focus on today were creating webinars and attendance expectations versus reality, creating content that can be reused should you want to reuse it, creating content that isn't going to stale date quickly. So when we talk about the .com bust, for example, if you created a ton of content about the .com bust, well, you can't use that anymore. So talking about COVID in every presentation you make is going to stale date every presentation you make, and you won't be able to use it past a year or so. Whereas if you create content that doesn't mention current events or specific news events, that content becomes evergreen and you can use pieces of it on an ongoing basis. We're going to talk about repurposing it, promoting it, and then how to create thought leadership opportunities with your content. And I can't think of a better person to have on the event today, because Barb is definitely known as a thought leader. Barb, your pedigree for the shows that you've been on, the books that you've written, and the other awards that you've won is pretty significant. Can you share some of the places that your content and you obviously have been featured?
Ooh, thank you for that. I completely forgot about it because all I thought was, oh shit, and I introduced this webinar talking about COVID and the lockdown, and I've essentially dated it. So I'm sorry about that.
We're going
So
to edit
prior
that in post.
So, you know what? I've been very fortunate. I do have a radio show with Humble and Fred Radio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I'm on the radio every other week. I've been on NBC, ABC, City TV. I did a whole TV tour when the book came out, IT Scams, How to Avoid Being Ripped Off. So that has helped in my credibility and establishing as a thought leader. I'm constantly learning, and when you're doing that, lots of times you're investing time and money, and then you run into other thought leaders, which has been great. So I've been able to meet some very cool people along the way that have been able to help me, that have been able to help develop my speaking career and how to translate geek speak to street speak, so to say. And that's been able to help my customers and their customers and everyone who uses computers on how to stay safe, because cybercrime is growing. The bad guys have a lead, especially here in Canada. And at CDN Technologies, it's our job to keep our customers safe and to educate their customers and vendors, because by working together, we can all stay safe and avoid clicking on things that we're not supposed to.
I swear that my MSP has cranked up the settings on my phishing testing right now, because I got like 3 or 4 today, and they have like a little fish in the corner where I can like nail the fish when I recognize one, and then I'm like, oh yay, I always get fished by the free frappuccinos. So I don't even like them.
Mine was, you missed a Zoom call. That was the one that got me. I was like, what? How did this happen?
Smart. I haven't seen that one yet. So for you bad actors out there, that's how you catch us IT people. See that we've missed meetings. So let's talk about creating the content for webinars. So most of my webinars are done free of charge. So I create content, I share content. There's been a few engagements where I had to do a ton of work creating the content, and people wanted unique content about sales or about sales and marketing. Obviously, I'm not creating content on how to avoid being hacked. That's not my area of expertise. But Barb and I were talking beforehand, and Barb is actually compensated quite well for creating webinars. So when you're going into an engagement, Barb, what are you thinking about when you're creating the content that your end users are going to consume? And I'm sure everyone here would love to know, how would they begin to be a paid thought leader? Because most of us are just like thought leaders.
Ooh, I think that it's practice. You know what? When I step back a little bit, a webinar is one of the many marketing things that we do at CDN Technologies, and that's one reason we're able to grow. So if people are struggling after this webinar, they should assess all of their marketing initiatives to see what they're doing to generate leads. Because if you're not growing, you're shrinking. And one of the reasons why we've been able to grow through acquisitions at CDN Technologies is because we've taken a multifaceted approach to marketing. So you kind of have to see where your leads are coming from. Don't put all of your eggs in just one basket. And doing a webinar isn't just going to help you grow. How did I end up getting to be a paid speaker? Well, it didn't start out that way. I took a class on how to speak, and it wasn't Toastmasters. I took a class on how to put my presentations together. When I engaged in my audience, and when people are looking to me to educate, to do a keynote, I do put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to address their pain points. I'll send out an ask campaign. I learned this from Ryan Levesque, and that's essentially to ask them what their pain points are, or if there's anything specific that they need me to address. So I incorporate that into my presentation so that everyone learns something while they're there. And I also get to get my objective across, is making them feel safe as to what it is they're doing with their technology, because we provide the technology services that protect and improve organizations. So whether it's protecting and improving using tools that they already have, or whether it's protecting and improving by updating their technology, because the last time they did it, it was 1999.
So an ask campaign, does that mean when you're asked to speak, you send out a request to the people that'll be attending to ask them what they're most interested in hearing about, or is it to the event organizer? Who do you send the ask campaign to?
It's to the event organizer always, and it's usually I've gotten the speaking engagement from someone who has seen me speak at a previous engagement. So I'll ask them, "Hey, what are you looking for? What do you hope to get out of this presentation? Is there anything specifically that you want me to answer? Is there something that you need help with?" So I'll just ask the questions beforehand, and they reply, and they'll have lots of answers. Like the last one was like, my merchant account keeps getting hacked, but my IT department, they scanned it and my computers were clean. How did that happen? And in that same result, I said, well, how do I know if an email is real when I check it in Outlook? And the other thing is if I get hit with a virus, how long am I going to be down for? So the questions can be broad. So that gives me an opportunity to share a story, to share learning points, and to making sure that the audience can get what it is that they are looking for from me. And that's usually help in understanding on how to address technology in their business or for themselves or for their family.
Okay, and a question came up during that conversation. They would like to know what methods you recommend for generating leads.
Oh, you know what? Lots. I have a list, essentially because there's so many things that you can do. And I don't know if you can see it. I put it on my whiteboard back here. So to generate leads and how I go about doing it at CDN Technologies, podcasts, direct mail, phone calls, digital media, radio, TV, Google AdWords, all of these initiatives I use to generate leads to help propel CDN Technologies forward, because people are out there. Everybody is in need of good IT, and I want to be a resource for them. So I have a multifaceted approach, and I figure out how to put it all together to make sure that there is some type of unison there across the board. So it's not like on Google AdWords that I'm pitching one thing and then in my direct mail, I'm pitching another, if that makes sense. Does that answer the question?
A strategy that links multiple lead generation techniques together in a cohesive way, as opposed to running an ad in or doing a Google search and listing for one thing and promoting for other things using separate methodologies. Am I summarizing that well? Okay.
You got it.
So everything. Barb's answer is everything.
Everything.
So let's talk about expectation management when creating webinars. So we do one a week, and I do webinars for multiple vendors on sales and marketing for managed services. And I have to tell you that on average, fewer than 50% of the people that register for the webinar will attend the webinar, at least in my experience. And the larger the sample data size, the higher the attendance rate. So if you only invite 10, if 10 people register, 2 will show up. If 100 people register, 60 will show up. So I don't know how or why that scales up the way that it does, but the better your list, the better your attendance, in my experience. Barb, have you seen something similar, or are you seeing something different?
I agree with you. My people who do not attend a webinar and people who attend a webinar, the ratio is off. So the people who do not attend the webinar, there's always more of those people than the ones who do attend. And that's why we make sure we have so many follow-up campaigns afterwards to make sure that we can still keep dripping and sharing information and educating those people through all the different mediums that are out there, whether that's direct mail, whether that's through a phone call, whether if they hear us on the radio or see us on TV, like there's always something happening. Because essentially you're always going to have, it's like having a party, right? You're always going to have the people that come and you're going to have the people that don't come. And if you come, you want your guests to have a great time, feel good, leave feeling great, have a parting gift, and so on and so forth. And if they don't come, you want to wonder, hey, well, how come you didn't show up? Like, you know what, are you busy? Like, you know, what do you have going on? So I always have my two strategies on how to deal with the people who attended and how to people who didn't attend, and how to deal with the people who said that they were going to show up and they never did. So everyone gets addressed accordingly through the different social mediums that we have, through the different tangible pieces that we have, so that we can get our message across of educating as many people as possible on how to stay safe online and how to keep their system safe.
So we have the platform that we use. You can create the email drip campaigns that you want to use to promote the webinar before and after. You can create separate campaigns based on the people that registered but didn't attend, registered and did attend. So you can do all of that work on the front end. You don't have to scramble to do it on the back end. When you're planning your marketing campaigns and you're adding webinars in, those are things that you can take care of while you're creating your marketing sequence. So you don't have to host a webinar and then say, oh God, what am I going to do about the 50 people that didn't show up? That should have been handled before you created the webinar. So if you don't know how you're going to market to the people that you want to bring to the webinar, and you don't know how you're going to market to the people that didn't attend the webinar, I would take a couple of steps back before hosting the webinar and figure out what message do you want to send and how do you want to send it?
Well, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because the activities that happen before the webinar are usually the exact same activities that happen after the webinar. So big secret there. So now essentially, where are all the bodies and how do you reach them? I think we covered that in our LinkedIn chat because for me, knowing where everyone is at, like a webinar is just a tool to move them forward in my sales process, and automating it all is the best way to do it, because there's no way you can do it all in one shot or with individual emails, but essentially you can send out your invite list. Like, you know, that can be automated. And we use Zoom, and I like it because in Zoom you get your stats lists, and it'll tell you, like, you know, who they are, what time they signed in at, what time did they leave at, you know, how long did they buy, like, you know, all of that is in, actually, I can't remember if Zoom does that in the buy thing or if that's something that we do afterwards in our debrief session, but Zoom does all of that. So this way I can tag them in my CRM as, you know what, send these ones a, hey, you know what, it was a great webinar. Thank you very much for coming. It can tag them with a little reminder note. And then also, like, you know what, send me a reminder to, hey, send them a reminder. Yes, I did it digitally. Like, you know, they got it in their email. They'll see it on Facebook. But hey, how do I stand apart? What if I send them a postcard that said reminder on it from cdntechnologies.com, just with a quick note, because now it's personal and it's just that added touch to distinguish me from someone else, to let them know that, hey, I'm interested in you. Like, you know what, I'm putting forth this postcard to remind you to come. Like, you know what, I want you there.
So you're doing that before the event?
Yes. And then after the event, I'll send them a thank you note. Thank you for attending. Because I do realize that it's busy and lots of people, you know what, they're they're going from webinar to webinar to webinar, or they're going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. And I think that lots of people, there are some great presentations that are out there where people are pitching and you don't even know that they're pitching. It's like all of a sudden you're just like, yeah, I need that. And you fall into that trance, like a great infomercial. And then there are other people where you just kind of like lose interest because they truly have no interest in the prospect. All they're looking at is their credit card number and if they can sign on the dotted line, things like that. So just little things that we have noticed going to other people's webinars. And whenever there's something good, I want to pick up from it. Like if something nice has happened, if something great has happened, I take it. And then if something happened that I didn't like on a webinar that I went to, I'm just like, okay, I'm not doing that. And you know what? Mental note for everyone, let's write this out. Never do this. Like, this is not good.
I have a few of those in my history as well. I'm ashamed to say, but I mean, at some point, like, I am tired of watching videos of people walking through airports or driving in their cars, like talking to no one. Like, what is so important that you have to tell me while you're in the airport? Like, you can't wait until you're sitting in a well-lit studio and sharing information with me in a way that makes me feel like you actually set up and prepared to tell me something? Or do you just like have to spout out content every 15 minutes? I've never understood that strategy. I much prefer sitting and talking to someone or having them talk to me in a way that is like, that at least feels like they put some effort in.
Oh, I hear you. And
you brushed your hair. Thank you.
I hear you. The ones that always make me laugh, they have their sunglasses on, one hand on the steering wheel, like they're driving along, like they're talking, like they're all that in a bag of chips. It never catches my interest. And then when I talk to people that are outside of my space, because they're getting bombarded with webinars too, I always ask them, I was like, do you watch the replays? And they're like, no, not really. And I'm just like, what do you like to receive afterwards? And afterwards, they've all said, you know what, they like a quick checklist to see if they're on track. And I thought that was actually a great idea, because with all of the video content that's out there now, I find that people's attention spans are shorter. So if you can give them a quick checklist or a quick tips to do after the webinar, that they appreciate that a lot more.
So after this webinar, we can put together a checklist of the things that you need to do after a webinar. It's very meta. I like it.
Fabulous. Good.
So let's talk about repurposing content, which is something I do a ton of. And Barb, you were mentioning that you're not such a big fan of repurposing simply because your content is normally compensated. So replaying it makes you less marketable.
Oh, okay.
Or is that how you would describe it?
I do repurpose my content. What I do not currently offer is a replay of the webinar.
I misunderstood.
Okay, so I do repurpose. I repurpose in the blogs. I repurpose in newsletters. I repurpose in digital media, like, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. I repurpose in sales letters. I repurpose in birthday cards. I repurpose on radio. I repurpose on TV. I repurpose in Google AdWords. All of the content that I repurpose, it's audience generated. And my whole philosophy around that is that if someone has the courage to ask the question and to put it out there, then chances are they're speaking for a hell of a lot of people too. So if I can answer this question and I can answer it well and I repurpose it, then it's going to be easier for people to pick up what I'm putting down, to understand what's going on, and to realize that, hey, CDN Technologies has a lot to offer, and I have a question and I'm just going to ask them. So I use it as a lead generation tool, repurposing content. That was my bullet number 3, to reduce, reuse, and recycle, so to say, because repurposing content, I think, is fabulous. Replaying a webinar, I know that lots of people are getting great results. My highest attending webinars are the ones where I've been invited to do a keynote for a targeted audience. So those are the ones that people have the replay on. But mind you, like I said earlier, they come with a check and they always come with a little thank you note. And this one is great. It says, "Thank you for your eye-opening presentation. The feedback from the group was all very positive. I would bet that most of the participants place calls to their IT people right after the presentation. We even enclosed a token of our appreciation, and I hope to have you back once the pandemic is open, the National Credit Financial Executives Forum." So that was one that I just did last week. They gave me a little gift, and they gave me a check and a little thank you card, and they gave me content for this webinar. So I've repurposed that. Whenever I've had a great speaker on my podcast, I've always repurposed that as well, because great speakers, like we're talking about, like, when you have the Kevin O'Learys, and when you have the David Hirschevaks and the Kim Mitchells of the world, they're used to speaking to people, like, on a very large scale, and they have great ways of simmering down the information, reducing it, and they'll have a great way of saying something that's crystal clear. And for me, that's great content to repurpose. So I do it, but I just don't offer replays and webinars.
So I'm the opposite. All of my webinars are available for replay, whether I did them myself or whether they're paywalled behind somebody else's site. I was saying earlier, I still get leads from webinars that I did in 2015 for like some backup vendors. And I'll get an email just like out of the blue, like, "Hey, I saw you on a webinar where you were talking about this." I think like, well, like that was from like 2000, and are we even doing that anymore? But I mean, it's still out there. And what I've found for me anyway, as I've learned a little bit more about domain authority and organic SEO ranking, is that the more I have my website and my name out there, the better. So every time I'm giving a webinar to somebody, it's coming with a backlink, and it's coming with a bio, and it's coming with information about my company. And I mean, really, how many times can I say cold call more often in 45 minutes or less? It turns out once a week for 6 years, but people are still listening. So awesome. Two very different approaches. And I think that if people were writing me checks for my content, I'd probably feel very similar to Barb in that I'd want them to give me bigger checks, so I would do less of them.
I think that another thing to add is when you look at like SEO and backlinks, you have to look at the mediums and what's capturing people's attention right now. Like Twitter, you only have, at 140 characters to get your point across. So sometimes your link can take up that amount of space. But if you have great copy to invite people, then you kind of just need only one on your YouTube channel. Then you have like Instagram. That increases your search engine optimization, but that's just a picture. Then you have things like Facebook and LinkedIn. Those are two separate platforms. So how much content can you put there? Like that ends up showing up in your search engine optimization. Like you don't need a whole, I don't think people, when they go to Facebook, they're going to watch a whole webinar. You might link it back to your YouTube page. Then when you get to YouTube, like, if you look at the videos that are grabbing the most attention, that have the most views, like when you're typing in how to something, you usually pick the one that's the shortest, not the longest. Mm-hmm. So are people rewatching the content there? Then you have the podcast as well. Like, that's a great platform to develop your SEO as well, because not too many people have podcasts or are taking advantage of all of the fields there to increase your search engine optimization. And they're small. Like, there's only less than 400 characters. And your podcast is geared towards making an audio connection. So I find that in repurposing content, like, webinars, once they're chopped up, that you can play, but a whole webinar, is someone going to watch it? My audience isn't as targeted as yours is, Carrie. Like, you're specific towards managed service providers, like, that's your niche marketplace. My verticals, I'm in manufacturing, I'm in health, I'm in financial, I'm in transportation and logistics. A trucker or someone who owns a trucking company, chances are if they're driving, if they're within the fleet, they're not going to watch a webinar, but they may listen to it. So it's easier to repurpose that into a podcast than it is for someone to visually watch. Plus, I also find it's really hard to compete with the sex scenes in Game of Thrones.
I just tried to start watching Game of Thrones again through pandemic, and it gives me like extreme anxiety. I've made it through like half of season 1 again, and I remembered why I couldn't finish it. I read all the books, but I can't handle it. Talk to me about Clubhouse, Barb. Are you using Clubhouse?
Like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse?
No, see, so there's a new app and it's called Clubhouse, and it only works on iPhones. And for the love of me, it's like, did we just invent the telephone again? I'm confused by Clubhouse. So it is what looks to me like an immediate podcasting app where you can create a room, invite people in to listen to you talk, or listen to you and a bunch of people talk, or you can just let everybody talk. It's like the millennial. Oh, wait, no, we're not millennials anymore. We're whatever comes after the millennials of conference calls. I don't understand the app. So you're not using it. I don't feel badly that I'm not using it. Good.
I use Lisbon for my hosting of the podcast, and then it's hosted on Apple and Google Play. Like, Lisbon kind of like feeds it all out, and that's been working great for me. My search engine results are awesome and has all the stats in there. I get a lot of downloads off the podcast. I can safely say that No Tech Talk is the #1 Canadian downloaded podcast about technology. And I like it because essentially it's my opportunity to take all the channel vendors and showcase what it is that they do and how I keep my endpoint safe.
I have not listened to it. Well, actually, that's not true because you featured Tracy on it, and I listened to it when Tracy was on it. So I have listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting is something I never really thought about. Although, could you not do the webinar and the podcast at the same time and then repurpose the content equally? Like, could we not have set this up in a way that allowed us to use both video content and audio content for a podcast after?
Absolutely, because essentially with live stream, I'm sure you can download it, and then if you just had audio, all you have to do is upload the audio to whatever podcasting platform that you have, and then you have your very first podcast. What happens after the webinar? Like, where are all the bodies? Finds it. So it's already there, because essentially all that's happening in the podcast is that it's predominantly audio and people can get it from wherever. It's a smaller file to download than a larger file is, like video. And then once you have people subscribe to a podcast, this is one of my favorite things, is that it automatically, when you download a new one, they get an alert on their phone. Like, it pops up on their screen, like, no Tech Talk podcast, like, at episode 72, what happens after the webinar, with Carrie Simpson of Managed Sales Pro. So now all of a sudden, like, they go to check to see what text came in, and all of a sudden No Tech Talk podcast update has just came in. So it's another touch that I have to increase my engagement, whether they choose to listen to it right then and there, whether they choose to listen to it afterwards. Maybe they choose not to listen to it. Like, maybe they need to catch up, like, in 3 weeks, and they can re-listen to things. But at least now they're getting an alert, they're getting a notice that lets them know that, hey, I have updated content. Like, I've reached out and touched someone without exposing myself to COVID.
Well, now you've got real estate too, right? Like, if it's popping up on their phone, you've almost got a little ad popping right up on somebody's phone, whether they have to swipe by it or swipe up, or I don't know what they do. I have everything turned off on my phone. I am such a tinfoil hat wearer when it comes to my cell phone. I don't have location services on. I don't have any alerts. I don't have anything. If I walk past somebody who has COVID, I'm never going to know because my phone's not going to do anything.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So like the more I learn about technology, the less I want anything to do with it. It's terrifying. Post-webinar engagement. So we talked about this a little bit already about how you can repurpose. We just talked about how you could take a webinar and turn it into a podcast and publish it and get some real estate on your followers' telephones or cell phones. One of the things I really like doing with webinars is so I take this out of the platform that we stream in, I download it, I put it up into YouTube, and YouTube has a fantastic editing tool in it where you can just chop out little bits of it. So instead of publishing 45 minutes of content, I can take out the pieces that I think are meaningful. If I want, like if Barb said something really insightful and I want to like capture that for all eternity and I want to play it over and over and over again on social media where it's only going to accept a 30-second clip or where people will only tolerate a 30-second clip, I can then take it, edit it out, create multiple files, and then reuse that in all of my social media marketing. So I personally don't edit my webinars when I feature other people, because I don't feel like it's fair to take anything that they've said and chop it out of context. So when I host someone on a webinar, the webinar publishes as is. But if I'm doing my own webinar where I'm just like spewing content at the camera, I can take that and then chop it into little pieces because I can take myself out of context all I like. But have you found success in creating small, like do you do anything similar, or are you focused on, or do you just take your podcast and how do you promote your podcast? Do you have little snippets? What do you do?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go back a little bit to the title post-webinar engagement because there's two people that I'm engaging with specifically after the webinar. The first is my team in-house. And that's essentially, okay, like, what happened on this webinar? I want to look at the stats, like, who took me up on my offer? What were the attendance level? How long did the webinar actually last? How many attendees stayed till the end, or where did I lose them? Did I have any technical difficulties in the platform? Where could I have improved? Like, on my energy levels, like where did I fade off? Or, where was I just like way too fast? Like things like that. What really flowed? What was easy for me to speak with, because I'm ESL, like English is my second language. I got braces when I was 40 to straighten my teeth. I still wear a wire. So what's easy to roll off the tongue, so to say. And then I look to see what questions were asked by the audience. And then I rewatch everything so that I can see what my mannerisms were. Did I make eye contact? Did I look down the barrel of the lens, or was I like off to the side, or did something happen and I got squirmy in my chair? Like all of these different things that happen in post-webinar engagement for Barb Paluszkiewicz and CDN Technologies, so that the next one could be even better. That's probably why I don't replay them, because there's always something wrong that I don't like about it. So there's that part. On the other side of things is like, everybody gets a follow-up. It's like Oprah and Christmas. Like, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Like everybody gets a follow-up. If you were a guest or if you were a speaker in my webinar, you're going to get a thank you. You're going to get a thank you note. You're usually going to get a little gift in the mail. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with you, just because of my sheer appreciation for it, to help me move my audience forward to the next level and taking your time and educating them. Because I'm truly appreciative of all of the insights that everyone shares to help me grow and to help my audience grow. So there's that. Then there's the whole, okay, are they going to get a letter afterwards? Is it going to be an educational piece? Is it going to be a warning? Like I have this one here, and I'll share. And the title is that irritated blood pressure shooting through the roof feeling you get when your email or other vital business systems go down for even a few minutes. You're going to get that you're going to get a letter of something, like something tangible that people can see. You're going to get a phone call. I'd like to say, hey, how's it going? And, are you interested in taking us up on the offer? It expires in a few days. There's going to be something afterwards. The post engagement of the webinar for my audience is very similar to the pre-engagement of how it is that I got them in there. My background is in chemistry, so I'm going to say it's chiral. It's like your hands, did they get the email beforehand? Did they get the email afterwards? So we do a lot for post engagement to keep pushing them forward, to keep moving them forward. Sometimes it's something silly that came up in the webinar, like this. Never make eye contact when eating a banana. Or if it's around Christmas time and we're talking about all the things that are thankful for, you'll get this was our Christmas card this year. I don't know if anybody can see it.
I'm trying to now.
It says there's two dogs, a Labrador and the hot dog, whatever it's called. And it says, my paws are frozen. And the other dog says, man, I wish that was my only problem. Let's see. So there's always a little bit of something that's happening that in the webinar that helps that I try to use to engage the audience so that my persona, it's a little bit entertaining, it's consistent, and it keeps them moving forward in a positive direction, because it's not like I'm peddling safety. Stay safe, make sure nobody steals from you, make sure you don't get robbed. I'm peddling security, or maybe peddling isn't the right word, but essentially the post engagement for the webinar for my audience is always a reminder of what happened. And hey, I got this for free. Why don't you take advantage of it by this date, and taking it from there.
So I'm hearing there's a lot of planning that goes into the process when you're creating content. You're not just throwing stuff up every week. You have a process that you follow before and a process that you follow after.
Yes, because getting back to making sure your content isn't stale. I always want to make sure that I'm showcasing things that are happening right now. I might go into the historical view, hey, you know what, this happened in 2014, the JP Morgan, when that bank got hacked, where it was 80 million credit cards and for people and 7 million for businesses. That's an old story. It was the first one that made the news, but essentially those hacks and those breaches of cloud platforms being hacked into, they're still happening today. It's same old. It's happening all the time. But then there's new things that are happening. I know that Huntress just offered a webinar to showcase how people are getting hacked through Zoom. That's great content for me to share with my customers to make them aware, because Zoom might not have been the best platform during this time, but they did make it pretty easy to buy and pretty easy to use. So they kind of emerged as leaders. So how to stay safe using Zoom, that's relevant content for now. That's probably going to be good for a few years as well.
God, I hope we see the end of nonstop Zoom soon. This is off topic, but I would say that virtual meetings for managed service providers, when we're scheduling them, they no-show 20% more often than face-to-face meetings. So when we're calling out, it's easier to get a Zoom meeting than it is to get a face-to-face meeting, but it is harder to get them to stick. So I'm just talking about one-on-one, just basic first sales appointments when you're in lockdown and you can't actually go walk the floor, or, you've got to have that first meeting somehow. We never had that problem before. So it's been really interesting trying to adapt our process to get people to stick to the commitments that they've made. Because much like schedule, like you register for a webinar and then something comes up and you're like, whatever, I'll watch the replay, or if it's a webinar, I'm sure they'll do another one. Meetings are perceived to be almost the same way right now. So trying to create stickiness with your one-on-one sales appointments, you're going to follow almost the same strategy that you're following for creating that engagement for the webinar. And you've got to find a way to scale it, because you can't put, if you're going to do a webinar for 100 people, yeah, you're going to plan and you're going to create things and you're going to create a process that's going to invite people to it and follow up after it. But if you have to do that for every single meeting that you're hosting now, that's a lot of work. So we're trying to create ways to make not just webinars stickier, but one-on-one Zoom meetings stickier. And I cannot wait until we can actually go to an event again. And I think the last event I went to was the AVIC event in Santa Barbara.
Oh, I think that was my last one too. I had a lot of fun there. They did a really good job putting it together. And it's interesting. It's because of, when I think about how CDN technology grew and how we originally added webinars into our marketing mix as a tool to use for marketing our services, it was from watching all of the vendors, because I felt I would see them on stage, and some of them would have a great presentation, and others I'd be just like, go get some training type of thing. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but they weren't the best presenters. But the follow-up that happened afterwards is it was usually a webinar. And the webinar was a rinse and repeat as to what happened on stage. So after seeing the vendors do it, I thought, you know what, this would be a great way for CDN Technologies, because we're federally incorporated. We work across Canada. This would be a great way for me to slowly but surely, expand my reach as to who it is that we can provide services for. So now if I could have a great webinar targeted at a very specific demographic, and then follow up with them through email and hard pieces of paper, so to say, something tangible, this will be a great marketing tool for me to use to be complementary for all of the other things that we're doing. So on my end, I'm not finding that I'm having people not showing up for Zoom meetings or meetings or anything like that. I'm not having that issue at all. My issue is that people still don't know how to use Zoom, so to say. So I'm sending them the Zoom link, and they'll be like, this is my first Zoom call. And I'm just like, oh, that's so exciting. Let me talk you through. And now I have it, but I have a checklist for afterwards. It's like, hey, if you ever have more, this is what you should, here's a quick checklist of 7 tips if you're going to be on a Zoom call on things to do. Make sure your cat filter is off, not unlike that lawyer. Just little things like that, so that people know, so that it helps them. So getting people to show up for the Zoom meetings, I haven't had that issue. But what I've seen is, and that where I'm liking, is that let's just say that I have a very targeted demographic, much like yourself. I have delivered the webinar, and I've had a couple of people, click on the registration link, or that they want, or they've downloaded the report, or they're taking me up on my freebie. What I found is that afterwards, when the results of my freebie is presented to me, it's another webinar, and I'm with a group of peers that's receiving the information about the cumulative results. You all have this, some of you have this, some of you don't, good job, or little things like that. And then afterwards, it's being funneled a little bit more. It's then you have then the sign. What is it? I don't use it. We use something else. Oh, the DocuSign comes into place if you want to engage. So it doesn't really get super personal until you get your account manager assigned to you once you've engaged with them. So I'm seeing a lot of that and the channel happening now for post-webinar engagement. So I don't know, that was kind of like a long-winded story, but at the end of the day,
I want somebody to do a security webinar, and then I want them to send out an email, and I want them to fish everybody on the receiver list. So can you please do that for me and see what happens? You do an entire hour on why you should never click on links in emails, and then send them an email with a thing to click on, and then, I don't know, pop open something that's just terrifying.
Oh, Mike, like that. I don't know. My kids have that one game, like, you go through and it pops open, so to say. Yeah, that would be actually like a really, really good thing to do. It's a lot of work, though.
So you're welcome for that idea, channel. Go for it. Let me know how let me know how it works out for you. What else we got to talk about today? Adapting your content for social media. I think you covered that pretty well today, but what platforms? Okay, we realize we're not using Clubhouse. We don't even know what it is. And that's because we're in our early 30s.
Okay. So all the ones that you have on the screen: Facebook, I'm there; Instagram, I'm there; Twitter, I'm there; Pinterest, I'm there; Google Plus, I'm there; Tumblr. Is that the swipe left, swipe right one for your
Tinder?
Oh, okay. I'm not there.
I don't need a new IT company. I don't need a.
Then there's YouTube. I'm there as well. And then there's all of the podcasting platforms, because one of them will pick up on another one. Like, I'm there. We have a whole employed a whole new digital media team to essentially weave all of this together, because they all seem to have erupted overnight. So adapting my webinar content for social media, depending on what it is, it can be a screen grab. Like, it can be like, a 2-minute video, just like you said that you do, because you're right. YouTube has an excellent thing for that. And to promote your SEO, let me remind people to fill in all those descriptive fields, because you never know what people type in to find you. And
what are you doing on Pinterest? Like, how do you promote an IT company on Pinterest? I don't even have a Pinterest account, so I'm not sure what the.
I think what goes on Pinterest are the same things that goes on our Instagram. I don't know. I'll have to check with the girls, because they're taking care of all of that. It's still overwhelming, because I have a password manager that I use, but I'm just like, when was the last time I logged into this? And it'll be on something else, and I'm always resetting things for them. And as soon as I dabble in there, I'm creating an extra hour of work because I screwed something up.
I cannot tell you how many times I've had to email Vertical Action and say, I touched something and I probably shouldn't have. So my new rule is, before you touch anything, email the dev team, and don't accidentally delete 3 years worth of blog posts because you wanted to change the format of your blog.
Yes. And then
good rule of thumb.
LinkedIn's not there. That should be added on there, because that's a good one.
So LinkedIn, again, tinfoil hat. Every year I delete all of my social media profiles. I wait 90 days till all the content is gone, and then I start over, which I know is terrible for marketing. And I didn't think about that when I started doing it. But you need 90 days before the platforms will delete any of your content, which I find very, very interesting. And
that's
then
a good
of course, gets my craziness going. But if you have a following, so I had a very good following on LinkedIn. And then I realized, after Microsoft bought LinkedIn, other apps started getting access to LinkedIn in ways that made me wildly uncomfortable. A friend of mine showed me a disk profile that they pulled from my LinkedIn account that was so eerily accurate that I was like, F this. LinkedIn is gone now. So I don't have the same amount of personal interaction on LinkedIn. I don't use the messaging, for example. I might interact once in a while with a contact I know really well, but I don't accept I don't accept messages from people that I don't know in real life. I got crazy weird around LinkedIn and what they were doing with our data and how it was integrating with Outlook. And I guess like if you're using Facebook, you don't have any right to get all weirded out by LinkedIn. But I do the same thing with Facebook every year. I download all of my content to a file. I label the file. I put it away somewhere. Then I delete my Facebook. I wait 90 days and I open a new account under a new name using a new fake email address. And I start right over again. And I'm sure that that's not great for business marketing. My Sales Pro Facebook account is still there. But I mean, that's a very one-way approach to market. I don't interact with people on Facebook. Or is somebody monitoring your Facebook page? Do they talk to people on it, or are you just posting on it daily?
I'm just posting on it daily. My Tech Tip Tuesday and my little tips, I usually turn those into boosted ads, and it's just to generate awareness. And that seems to be increasing my followers on digital media. And I'm doing that so eventually I can, send out an offer to them. I'm not too sure how that's going to work. Whenever I have someone cool on the podcast, I invite them to come in. Like when I had Kim Mitchell, that was pretty cool, where he came onto the
like
podcast.
Patio Lanterns, Kim Mitchell?
I sure did. He was amazing.
Awesome.
He was amazing.
That's so Canadian. We're so Canadian right now.
I know. And so I'll do that. Where I use LinkedIn a lot, and it took me a while to get to the 500 for the exact same reasons that you just said. I didn't delete anything. It's because I want my connections to be in my vertical, in my target market. I do want to see what my peers are doing, but usually my vendors keep me apprised of that. But essentially here in Canada, as you know, if I buy a list or if I go to a trade show and things like that, or if I'm speaking at a keynote, I could have 100 people there and they can be listening to me and I won't know who they are. I won't get their email addresses. I won't get their telephone numbers. I won't get any of their contact information at all. So when I'm doing my webinars, it's really important for me to have a +1 there so that as I make my webinars engaging and getting people to type into the chat, I can essentially have them scrub the list, because usually people will say, like on us, you see all of the thousands of people that are connected right now to us, like you see like their first name and their last name. So afterwards, I'll have my team go to LinkedIn and then say, you know what, send them their thank you note. You know what, send them a reminder of the links to get more information, you know, a link to the freebie, a link to the free report. So I do use LinkedIn that way, because that's the only way that I'm able to connect with someone after the event. So that's how I'm using my social media adaptation. Afterwards, like, you know what, when they reply, it's good, but now, you know what, I know where it is that they work. I can Google the company address, and now, you know what, I can send them a piece of personalized mail, like a thank you card or my newsletter or a postcard in the mail to keep that process moving forward in a positive direction, about educating them on the technology services that we can provide to protect their organization and to help their organization stay safe.
So for those of you who are not from Canada, Canada has very specific rules around opt-in permission for email marketing, meaning that you need express consent. You can't just arbitrarily send email to a list. It's not assumed that just because somebody came to hear you talk, they welcome your email engagement afterwards. So in order to be in compliance with CASL regulations in Canada, you have to have somebody stating on a recorded line, yes, I agree to receive email correspondence. So a couple of hacks for those of you who want to learn how to get around that. Just incorporate, like, start a business in the US. Costs $50. Get your email server in the US. Send all the email you want. There's no regulations for US companies emailing into Canada. So you didn't hear that from me.
I had no idea.
Another thing that we realized as we were attending or talking at events where they didn't share the user list is most of the time now events have an app. So you can see every person that's attending the event. So the first thing I do when I hit the floor at the conference is have somebody else back in my office download the app and screenshot every attendee and then start adding them to the database. All their information is there, company name's there, website address is there, email address is there, phone number is there. The one thing you want to worry about when doing that is if they have put their personal cell phone number into the app, people get very, very angry when you call them on their cell phone. So for those of you who are doing outbound marketing, I do not recommend the calling people on their cell phone route. So we're getting to the top of the hour, and I think that we're pretty much out of time. If anyone has some direct questions for Barb, do you have a couple of more minutes, or are you like done, 4 o'clock done?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
So if anyone has a question, we got a couple more minutes, and then we will be available on the replay.
Okay. If I swore or anything like that, you can.
I swear on my webinars all the time.
Okay.
I don't edit them out. We're all adults. It's good. We're good.
Good.
I don't think you did swear though.
That's what I really try hard not to, but it's so constantly dropping them left.
So effing hard. Well, it's been a real pleasure to host you today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the information that you shared with us. And if you want to reach Barb, she mentioned her contact information at the beginning of the webinar. But Barb, do you want to let everyone know how they can find you again?
Oh, it's cdntechnologies.com. CanadianTechnologies.com. Thank you, Carrie, for having me. This was great. I enjoy the candidness, the relaxed conversation of just being able to talk about processes, because essentially we're all here to help each other move forward and move our businesses, and everybody who's listening move their businesses forward in a positive direction. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I got like great notes today. I got 2 pages of things that I want to follow up on afterwards. So I will have an email with some follow-up questions for you. Thank you, everyone who took time out of their day to join us today. I hope you join us again next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're talking about direct mail for managed services. Is it still working with nobody in the office? Very interested in hearing other people's feedback, and I've invited a couple of MSPs who are experiencing mixed results. So we've got some people joining us that are doing very well with direct mail, and we've got some people who have not been so pleased with their direct mail results. So I'm interested in seeing and I'm not letting them talk to each other first. So I want to see if they're sending out the same stuff with different results, or if they're sending out completely different types of direct mail. So that's what you can look forward to next week. Thanks again, Barb. And thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
No problem. Peace and love, everybody.